Hi, I'm Elaine Wing. I'm the pastor here at Calvary United Methodist Church in Dumont, New Jersey, located in Bergen County. I'd like to share a story with you today from the book I've just started reading called Love Does by Bob Goff. It is a story that has caught my attention because here in Dumont, we have a store called Dumont Hardware. But for those of us that live in Dumont, we know it as Bill's store because Bill is the owner and his dad before him. It's the kind of place where people gather. And so I think you'll hear a little bit of Bill's story within this story told by Bob. It's a story from his childhood. When I was a kid, I used to walk to the corner store to buy candy. The store in our town had a bell with a spring that would jingle whenever you entered the front door. Inside was a wonderful old man with gray hair and white whiskers that stood out like corn stalks. He had this great grin on his face whenever anybody opened the door. He would stop packing the groceries and he'd nod and he'd grin and make everybody feel really comfortable. I used to think that that was the best job in the world because he was the candy keeper. He was the luckiest man. He could get whatever candy he wanted from his store and probably didn't have to pay for it. But I did have to pay. All week when my dad came home from work, I would check out the change in his pants after he changed, and when I got enough money, I would walk down to the corner store and I would go up and down the aisles where the candy boxes were like I was a curator in an art museum picking out a priceless piece of art. Once I selected my candy, I'd take it up to the register and I'd stick my hand in my pocket and I'd plunk all my change down on the counter. And I'd look up at the man and say, "This is what I want." And the old man would take his hands and he'd separate the nickels from the dimes and the quarters and the pennies. He'd line them up in rows and he would slowly begin counting in a very soft, gentle voice. When he counted to the right number, he'd slide the candy toward me, scoop up the part of the money that was his, and hand me the rest of the money that was mine. Most of the time, I ate the candy before I left the store because it was the kind of place I wanted to stay. I liked to listen to him talk to each customer. They would tell the same old stories, but he'd make each customer feel like what they had to say was something he'd never heard before. It was a great place to be because he made it the kind of place that everybody wanted to go and know that they were special there. One morning, after having collected enough change from my dad, I ambled on down to the store, I chose my candy bar, and I sprinkled my change before him at the register. He began his usual process, separating the coins into rows like he always did, and he started counting in his gentle voice, stopping to remind me what was a quarter, what was a nickel, what was a dime. He asked me to count out loud with him. I usually stopped counting after 11 or 12, and he would finish up for me without making me feel bad. Somehow he made it sound like we were both still counting. When he was done, I'd look into his eyes to see if I had enough. He'd usually give me half a nod and a grin to let me know that I did. On this morning, though, things were different. When he finished counting, he shook his whiskered face and he squinted. It was the first time this had happened, and I suppose this meant I didn't have enough money. "We're 1 penny short," he said sympathetically. When you're a kid, 1 penny is an impassable divide, and you feel really alone when it's just you not having enough pennies. But he said, "we." And that made me feel like we were in this thing together and that my goal was his. "I've got an idea," said the storekeeper. And after a couple of long moments, he grabbed one of the pennies and he reached behind the counter. He got an old rag and a bottle of vinegar. He poured a little vinegar and a little bit of salt onto the penny and he began to rub and rub and rub. "Well," he said, "I know exactly how you feel." He grinned as he was rubbing that penny. "I know what it feels like to really want something and to come up short." This was the longest sentence he had ever said to me. "I really love watching this store," he said. And I love that you come to see me so much and that we get a chance to visit. As he finished rubbing the penny, it was a brilliant copper color, like it had been freshly minted. He dropped it onto the counter with the others and he said, "In my store, shiny pennies are worth double." "Really?" I asked. "They are?" "Yup, shiny pennies are worth 2 cents. And you know what? I believed him. And it wasn't just because I was a kid and he was a man and the storekeeper. I believed him because of who he was. Words spoken by kind people have the ability to endure in our lives. It's been 40 years since that happened, and whenever I see a shiny penny, I still think shiny pennies are worth 2. I know what you're thinking. Shiny pennies aren't worth 2 cents, and the storekeeper was hatching a plot to ruin my grades in math class years later. But that's not the case. To him, shiny pennies were worth 2, especially if they were my pennies. They may not be worth 2 at the next store, but in his store, he made the rules, and he made this rule just for me. You know, Jesus was always talking about rules and a reverse economy. He talked about, if you want to receive, you first give. If you want to lead, you follow. That the poor are rich and you really only live for certain things if you're willing to die for them. When I learned from the storekeeper that day, in retrospect, is eerily familiar and shows me that we have more power than we think to make our own rules about life and what's really important, an economy that Jesus put in place. We get to be the storekeeper, or at least figuratively, and we get to decide who gets what and what things are worth. We get to decide that people, including ourselves, are worth more than others might figure, and that following Jesus means sometimes doing the math differently, because we're actually all on the same side of the counter when it comes to needing a little help and grace, and a shiny penny could make the difference. May you have a week full of shiny pennies. Stay safe, be well. Until next time, God bless.